Hello, Patrick Whitefield. Thank you very much for talking to us today for International Permaculture Day. This is Mike Grenville from Transition Forest Row, and Patrick, you're described as one of the leading permaculture teachers in Britain and even Europe, and you've really been involved for a very long time. You've been really teaching since 1990. You've worked in agriculture, not just in England, but in the Middle East and Africa. You've written several books about permaculture, Permaculture in a Nutshell, How to Make a Forest Garden, Earth Care Manual, and probably a favourite of mine, The Living Landscape, How to Read It and Understand It. So what really inspired you to get involved in permaculture, and what's your vision for the future of permaculture?
Well, I really started in permaculture because I met someone. I was actually talking to him for some completely different reason. I only just met him, and I said, and what do you do for a living? He said, I'm a teacher of permaculture. And he just said a few sentences to me, and the spark went from him to me. But I had known about permaculture before that, of course. But what really inspires me about permaculture, I think, can best be expressed by a comparison between two ecosystems. Permaculture is all about ecosystems. Well, it's not. We learn from ecosystems, although the things that we do may not look like ecosystems. But if you compare, for example, a reed bed with a bit of chalk downland. Now, reed beds have an unnaturally high, for a natural ecosystem, an unnaturally high level of nutrients, masses of water, no shortage of resources whatsoever. And by comparison, a chalk downland, up on the hill, very porous rock, it's dry, very thin soil, very poor in nutrients. Mm-hmm. But if you compare the composition of those two, the reed bed is just one plant, a monoculture, a natural monoculture, whereas the chalk downland can have an enormous number. In extreme cases, there can be up to 100 different species of plants in 1 square meter. Because what the reed bed does, there is one very productive plant which is very good at making use of a high level of resource input. What the chalk downland does is there's a whole mixture of plants all doing different things. Some are tall, some are short, some are early season plants, some are late season plants, some fix nitrogen, some are climbers, some are ground cover, and there's just a whole plethora of different plants doing different things. And that's how they make use of a situation where there is not this massive supply of resources. Now, over the past half century and more, we've been farming and living all of our lives, not just in terms of food production, but everything like a reed bed. Throw masses of fossil fuel at an abundance of fertilizer, an abundance of this, an abundance of that. Whereas what we've got to do is to learn to live like the chalk downland. We've got to learn to be diverse and to have small solutions. There's no big solution, and this is what permaculture is all about. Permaculture is about having diversity, like the chalk downland, not an excess input of resources as we've had in the fossil fuel age.
Interesting. Yeah. So yes, all the different things. I suppose just off, I would have thought that the reed bed was more complicated than the downland, but of course all the different things involved. So I read on your website that you planted an orchard 15 years ago, and this really is one of your, I don't know if it's one of your key ways in which you get through the winter. In fact, you're telling me you're still eating apples in May from last year, which is fabulous. So, and we've lost so many apple trees. So, how do you see? What's the role that you see apples playing in creating community resilience?
Well, of course, apples, perennial plant, very much what we're into in permaculture. But I think one great thing about apples and fruit in general is it's something that everybody can grow. I mean, you don't need much space. Even if you've got a tiny little space, you've got enough space for a blackcurrant bush or something climbing up the side of your house. And two great advantages to growing fruit. One is that everybody likes it, even children.
Yeah.
Can't be said for all kinds of vegetables by any means. The other thing is, there's very little work involved. You know, once you've got your trees or bushes established, there's just a little bit of pruning, maybe a little bit of mulching, and just harvesting.
Yep, yep, yep. And actually, although that sometimes is the issue, isn't it, of actually getting people to eat the fruit that the tree produces is one of the things I've seen, where people are so used to buying them in packets and ignoring the ones in their garden.
I think that's often because the ones in the garden are old varieties which don't taste like what people are used to. If you get the newer varieties, they taste much better, much sweeter, and also they've got a lot of disease resistance bred into modern varieties. So old varieties aren't necessarily best.
That's a good point. Thank you. So what's your message then for all the fellow permaculturists on International Permaculture Day?
Well, I think it's get to know your neighbours. Get involved locally, get involved in the local community. I mean, to some extent, you know, we network with people all over the country, all over the world, because we want to talk to people with like minds, and we go to permaculture convergences, and you know, I think that's great, and I don't think we should stop doing that.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, we should get to know our neighbours, whether they're interested in permaculture and sustainability or not. And I don't mean try to preach to them, I just mean get to know them.
Yeah.
So when the crunch comes, we've got that firmer base of, you know, of connections with people, which will be so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really, really good advice, Patrick. Thank you so much for talking to us today. And may your courses be filled with students and your apple trees filled with abundance. So thank you so much. And to everybody, please visit the permacultureday.info website for all the events happening around the world that hopefully will produce good compost for many more interesting talks to come. Thank you. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.